Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Since it is 12:30, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Lacey. I am the Administrative and Program Coordinator here at the California Association of Museums, and I'm going to get us started with just some quick housekeeping. First of all, just so everyone knows, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to YouTube following the program. It will also be sent out to all of you via email as registrants. Our presenter today will be answering questions at the end of her presentation, so we encourage you to type your questions in the Q&A icon that you'll see at the bottom of your screen and send in your questions. And you can also use the chat box, which I'll be monitoring during her presentation. Live captioning is available for today's program. I will paste the link. I have pasted the link in the chat box, and I'll continue to do so as more people join us. And if anyone has any technical issues, please feel free to message me using the chat box, or you can send me an email, and I'll do my best to address it. Now I'm going to pass it off to CAM's Executive Director, Celeste DeWald, who's going to introduce today's program. Thank you.
Thank you, Lacey, and thank you, Lacey, for all the prep work in preparing for today's webinar. I greatly appreciate it. As we begin this event, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. Our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of indigenous peoples. We honor and are grateful for the land we occupy and recognize the ongoing damage of settler colonialism. Let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all indigenous people have shown worldwide. I am on the traditional territory of the Amamutsin Ohlone. I encourage you to name and acknowledge the Native peoples where you are located in the chat box. Please send it to all panelists and attendees in the chat box so that we all can honor the original inhabitants of these lands. So as you can see, Lacey has posted in the chat box a URL that you can use, native-land.ca, to look up your Native peoples if you don't know them offhand. Thank you for participating, and please continue to post your Native peoples in the chat box as you can. Now I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors of our program. CAM's Technology Fellowship and free Lunch and Learn webinar program are supported in part by Associated Foundations Incorporated in memory of Barry Herlihy. Live captioning is supported in part by the National Arts and Disability Center at the University of California, Los Angeles and Ability Central. And in general, the California Association of Museums is supported in part by a grant for the California Arts Council, a state agency. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today and the program. Today's Lunch and Learn program, How XR Experiences in Museums Can Support Equity and Inclusion, is presented by this year's CAM's Technology Fellow, Kat Quigley. Kathryn Quigley, or Kat, right, Kat? Yes, is a senior digital producer at the Lawrence Hall of Science with 10 years of experience developing educational media projects for museum exhibits, classrooms, and online platforms. As a San Francisco native, Kathryn's interest in media began while attending the School of the Arts High School. She later combined her love for media with science education, earning both a bachelor's in geophysics and a subsequent master from UC Berkeley. Currently, Kat has a special interest in designing media experiences with a lens of equity and inclusion in formats such as video documentaries, interactive kiosks, AR, and VR. So thank you, Kat, for being our CAM's Technology Fellow and preparing this webinar for today. We look forward to learning from you.
Awesome. So I guess this is the part where I share my screen, right? We did practice this. Okay, share. Excellent. Yeah, so hi everybody out there on the internet, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to be here today to share what I've learned in the past several years as I've started to kind of dip my toes into developing XR experiences and thinking about how they can intersect with our goals around DEAI, diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. And I also wanted to apologize, like I changed the title actually to expand it to include the full DEAI after I had already submitted the title. So this is like a little bit different. So today I want to go over what XR is, different ways it's being used in museums, and how the affordances of certain types of XR can align with maybe certain visitor-facing goals we have around diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. And then I'll also spotlight some different XR use cases that I think do a really good job exemplifying projects that can support DEA goals. All right, so jumping right in, what is XR? Many of you probably know this already, but XR stands for extended reality. So you might hear people saying AR, VR, and then you might hear people saying XR. It's like, those actually mean the same thing. So I like XR better because I think it actually kind of alludes to the fact that these technologies are kind of lying on a continuum between on the far left, you have kind of the spatial AR, and this is like, you're still aware that you're in reality. It's kind of immersive, but you're not like totally in another planet. The projections are two-dimensional generally, and so that's kind of like on that end of the spectrum, and then even further would just be like straight up reality. But then on the far end of the spectrum, you're fully immersed, and that can even, I'll show some examples later, but that can be to the point where it's like you're totally transported into another reality, and they're going crazier and crazier these days with it, where it's like you have like haptic feedback, you're feeling the buzzing and the wind, and it's just who knows what they'll do next with this. So it's kind of like in between there, you have sort of the AR technology sort of bleeding into the VR technology. And so today I want to kind of go over all these different types of technology and how they're used in museums, and then think about how they can be, what their affordances are, and how they can be kind of leveraged in certain ways to support goals that we might have that are important to us. And so this is kind of an overwhelming, crazy slide, but it's kind of on purpose because I wanted to just kind of give a little background of the landscape for these technologies. And just to say, they're in a very emergent state. And so there's a lot of different companies developing a lot of different things, and things are changing quickly, and there's not really any, like things are sort of settling out in some ways with VR, but I think in general, like there's a lot of different development tools, platforms, dissemination things, sensors. It's like it's always evolving and changing really rapidly. And so it can be very challenging and overwhelming when you want to enter this space to figure out like what to focus on and what to learn and what you should be doing. And so if you feel a little bit overwhelmed, you're not alone. I also do. But I wanted to draw your attention to the top bars of these kind of crazy Where's Waldo diagrams, where it's talking about the applications. And so these are different fields that are using AR and VR. So there's, consumer, social, games, and entertainment. And you see like, actually education even has its own little column. And so what I want to do next is kind of explore in our space, that's not even on here for museums, is how XR technology is being used in museums. So we'll return now to the spectrum. So the first one is spatial AR. And I'm just going to go over all of these. I know some of you out there might be experts or might be super familiar with all of this, and I do apologize, but I think it's useful if you just heard the term AR, VR, and you're not like really sure exactly, like you've seen some examples, but it's just kind of, let's put it all together and just get like kind of a lay of the land. So just bear with me if this is repetitive for some of you. So spatial AR is a type of technology where it's projection based, or it's using a screen. And there's some type of sensor that's able to detect your hand motion or your gestures or your head position, and use that as an input into the computer simulation, usually run by a game engine or something like that, and then have the display dynamically engage with the way that you're interacting with it. And so I want to give you a couple examples. This is one that people are probably pretty familiar with, that a lot of museums have. So this is the AR Sandbox, kind of classic. This is one of the first, I think, AR exhibits to be created. And I think it was originally created by scientists to help them model watersheds. And so this is an example, actually a photo of one we have at the Lawrence Hall of Science where I work. And basically it works by the sensor is able to detect depth really accurately of the sand. And I think it helps that it's white or something like that. And so as the people mess around with the sand, it's actually, it can tell that the depth, the height has changed, and then it adjusts the projection accordingly to make it seem like the topo lines are changing and mapping on the terrain on top of it. And so it can also detect when there's a hand placed over it and there's a shadow, and what it'll do is actually make it rain. So then it's like how you introduce water into the ecosystem. So this is like a little box that people can mess with. And then another example that I think is really amazing that probably a lot of people are familiar with is this exhibit, Connected Worlds, that's at New York Hall of Science. I never had the opportunity to see it in person, but I'm like a big fan of it from afar. So instead of the AR Sandbox, where you're looking at this box that's kind of like a tabletop interaction, and Connected Worlds, you're immersed in spatial AR. So you're going into a room where there's projections on these huge walls and on the floor. And it's kind of a similar user interaction with the Sandbox, where the sensors can tell when your hand is blocking the projection. So it's almost like you can tap on this wall and it's like a button almost. And here's an example of the floor projection, and it's actually using the position of these different foam, slices of foam to dictate the flow of the streams, I believe. And so that's kind of similar in the AR Sandbox, where you can actually change the texture of the sand and it's gonna dynamically interact with the projection. So this has a lot of cool affordances for education, definitely. And also, you know, the fact that multiple people can socially engage with it and it's device free. And then here's another example of a screen-based AR. And this is an exhibit that we also have currently at the Lawrence Hall of Science that is from Rob Lindgren's lab at University of Illinois. And so they developed this AR simulation to teach kids about energy. And so this is using a Kinect that's in that box with the yellow arrow, and it's able to detect the player's motion. And again, this is nice because it can be multiplayer. People can just walk up to it in big groups or one-on-one, like two people, and they don't know if, what I wanted to say is that if big groups of field trip kids run up to it, it doesn't break. And so it doesn't really need a lot of facilitation, but you still get that kind of like dynamic visualization. And so let me see. So now let's go to mobile AR. So I did have a video of that one, but I think I'm just gonna keep rolling. So the mobile AR, let me just talk about this for a second. So mobile AR is where you have a tablet, and some people call this like see-through VR. And this is basically where you, sorry, something moving around on my screen. This is the interaction that a lot of people are used to. So it's kind of like Pokemon Go, where you're basically, you know, holding up your phone and you're able to, the app's able to use the video camera from the phone and take advantage of that and overlay different assets on top of it inside the phone's view. And so you're able to take advantage of the gyroscope sensor, so it can tell like how high or low you are. You can tap the screen to interact with the different objects. You can also, I think, use voice commands sometimes and things like that. And so that's mobile AR. And so here's an example. Oops. Okay. So this is the Connected Worlds exhibit. Sorry, I didn't change the title, my bad. Sorry about that. This is the Body Worlds exhibit from the Tech Interactive in San Jose. So I hope it's okay with them that I grabbed this off their website to showcase. But this is an example of what's called location-based, I guess, AR app. So basically, there's different assets that are 3D that are anchored within a given space. So the exhibit space is sort of mapped out in advance, and then you're able to kind of place large 3D objects in certain spots so people can walk up with the tablet and look around it and view it. And sometimes the assets might have some animation like they did in this case. And so for them, they actually rented out the tablets. And so people were able to just borrow them. And that can be good because it can be challenging to develop for multiple types of tablets at this point. So here we go. Here's another example that's what I would call trigger-based. And so I'm going to show a quick video here. Hopefully it works. Let me see. How do I not? Oh, there we go. Sorry. There's the chat bar was covering my tabs. Okay, so this one I'm going to show.
Let's see where Micro Rangers is going to take us today. I need to hold up my coin.
Micro Ranger, welcome to the ocean habitat. Our next micro crisis distress call is just coming in.
Okay, so that I just wanted to quickly show that. So this is like this is a mobile app from AMNH. And so they have these little coins that you can basically hold in your hand. And so this is called trigger-based, where it sees the app recognizes the image, and then it triggers like some kind of thing to play in the app. And for that one, it was like a 3D asset that looks like it's popping out of that coin, which is really cool. And I think for them, they're using people's personal devices, and people can explore around in the museum almost like they're on a quest. All right, so that the next one I want to talk about is mobile VR. And so mobile VR is where you have a mobile phone that can go into your headset. So like a Google Cardboard. And here's an example that we'll go into later in the spotlights, but this is a company called Kai XR, created by Kai. And it's a good way to basically, and for museums to be able to disseminate their information and their content out to the community because it's really scalable. And so that's that example. And then now we have AR headsets. So AR headsets, I'll just say really quickly, are head-mounted AR. So that means that you're wearing like a headset on your head, but you can either see through the lenses because they're see-through, or there's a video feed that's allowing you to see live around you and then overlaying the information inside of that. And so this is an example from NASA called Destination Mars, where people are wearing these headsets and walking around in this big exhibit, and they're seeing actually a hologram of Buzz Aldrin explaining the geology of Mars, and it's multiple people can be in groups. They see a hologram of a scientist explaining a rover. Yeah, you can do different kinds of gesturing, user interactions like air taps and things like that, so it recognizes hands. And here's another example from this company called Enkalu, who created this immersive exhibit called Unreal Garden, where it's like you have all these props that are mixed with the fact that you're wearing the AR headset, so you're seeing holograms, and all of the headsets are networked together. So you notice all these people are pointing at the same thing. It's because they're all seeing the same thing at the same time. Okay, so now we'll go on to the full VR headset. So this is one where you're fully immersed and you're wearing the headset, you got the headphones on, you can hear spatial audio, you have the controllers, and you have 6 degrees of freedom. And this is an example of some pop-up prototyping events we did at our museum, where we were, some engineering students that were creating a VR experience were prototyping it with our visitors. And so we made one experience that was about the human microbiome and another one that was about the whale ecosystem of the fin whale, which is kind of our informal mascot at our museum. Okay, so now finally I want to go over this kind of edge case, which is location-based VR. And I couldn't really find a great copyright-free image of this, but this is kind of all I could find. That the basic characteristics are like you're wearing the computer on your back, you're wearing a headset, and you've got like sometimes haptic feedback kind of gloves or sensors that can detect like the position of your feet and also like buzz when you're interacting with the environment. And sometimes like they have this at Disneyland and other places where you pay and you're with other people socially, and then there's like props and things like that, where when you see it in the VR, it's actually a real object in the real place. So maybe, for example, there's a ramp that you're seeing some crazy thing in VR, but like you can physically climb over that ramp in the real world. So there's props that are aligned one-to-one with the visuals. So that's why it's called location-based. And okay, so that's kind of just an overview of the full spectrum and sort of a picture of different examples of what's happening in museums, just so we're all kind of on the same page. And now I wanted to just dive into what different goals might be for DEAI. So first I wanted to just get us all on the same page. I'm sure that everybody has actually seen these before, but I wanted to read off the DEAI definitions from AM's report Facing Change. And so diversity. Diversity is the ways that people are different and the same at individual and group levels. Even when people appear the same, they are different. Organizational diversity requires examining and questioning the makeup of a group to ensure that multiple perspectives are represented. Okay, and equity. Equity is the fair and just treatment of all members of a community. Equity requires commitment to strategic priorities, resources, respect, and civility, as well as ongoing action and assessment of progress towards achieving specified goals. Accessibility. Accessibility is giving equitable access to everyone along the continuum of human ability and experience. Accessibility encompasses the broader meanings of compliance and refers to how organizations make space for the characteristics that each person brings. Inclusion. Inclusion refers to the intentional, ongoing effort to ensure that diverse individuals fully participate in all aspects of organizational work, including decision-making processes. It also refers to the way that diverse participants are valued as respected members of an organization and/or community. While a truly inclusive group is necessarily diverse, a diverse group may or may not be inclusive. Okay, so those are awesome. And so I guess in this section, I wanted to go over just kind of how you can make kind of a digital strategy when it comes to XR and connecting that to your goals that you might have around DEAI for your museum. So this is like, these are 4 general goals that kind of relate to the science museum space. And I know that there's probably people from other types of museums, but I hope this process can be transferable. So, and so I want to just kind of go over these goals and look at like which aspects of DEAI they align with first, and then I'll talk about how they connect to XR. So the first goal would be deeper learning in exhibits for all learners. And so I think this is something that I don't have like a huge amount of personal experience in, but I'm very interested in, and I think that's really important. So there are a lot of affordances with XR, and I think just in general, it's a really exciting space to explore. But just as a general goal, we want universal design, and we do want to make sure that we're supporting family conversation and all these kind of things as we try to make exhibits more dynamic and immersive and engaging. And so I think that this goal supports accessibility because it's about thinking about ways that you can make an exhibit good for all learners and everybody that's coming to it. And it's also inclusive because it's, at least when you're thinking about it in terms of a technology rich exhibit or something like that, you want to provide a learning experience that works for everybody to come to it, that people that don't feel like they have a background with it, like parents with their children, feel supported by the structure of the actual exhibit to be able to converse with their kids and feel like they can just have like a more meaningful experience with their families, even if they have no background information. Especially, I see that a lot in science museums. And so the second goal is bringing the museum content out to the community. And so this relates to kind of all 4 because it's about, you know, providing more like broader, you're making your content more broadly accessible, so that's more diverse, and then you're being more equitable because you're providing access to the content that people might not have had because it was hard for them to get to the museum. And likewise for accessibility, there might be people that can't get to the museum, where if you're bringing things out to them, then they'll be able to engage with the content. And then finally, it's inclusive because as you're coming out to the community, you're including everybody. And so the third goal is just to bridge the tech divide. And so that's definitely, did I erase? Oh yeah, equity. So that's definitely an equity one. And then finally, the STEM workforce issue. So probably heard of the term leaky pipeline and things like that. And so we want to have youth that are currently underrepresented in STEM be able to build positive identity around STEM and have access to learning opportunities that promote skill building and promote them to have career awareness in the STEM field. So those are our goals. And so those four can be mapped out, and then you can create kind of a digital strategy where you can map those goals that you might have at your institution to different affordances of different XR technology. And so this is like a little bit crazy looking diagram, but I think this can be a useful process, even if it might feel a little bit obvious or repetitive or something like that, because you can kind of map out the space and think about, like when you're writing a grant or there's different opportunities that come up, you kind of have a sense of which technology aligns with which of your goals. So the first one, in terms of deeper learning for all, this is really cool because I think that this can work with a lot of different XR technologies. And as I mentioned before, I think XR has affordances for deeper learning because it can actually increase focus and emotional connection, the more immersive ones like VR. But then on the flip side of that, those ones can also be really isolating and not really align as well with what we know about the way people learn socially and collaboratively in informal spaces. So I think what would be really interesting to me is thinking about how to blend these different technologies more. So you're providing multiple entry points for people, and some people might not be able to wear the headset or might not be able to access things in the same ways as other people that are at the exhibit, even if they're just like really young or really old, or if they don't see or they don't hear or different things. So it's just providing those different entry points, but still having opportunities to dive deep into like more of an immersive experience is really cool with this technology. And then another super cool thing I think that we're sort of exploring more now is having the different blended technology can offer different roles within the family group. So that if you have kind of like a computer and you have a projection, the kid can be engaging with the projection that gives the parent a role on the computer. And so that giving people different roles can actually increase the amount of family conversation that's happening, which also deepens the learning and also supports the parents in knowing how to engage in the exhibit and engage more deeply with their kids. And so I think those are some really cool things. Also with the AR, it can act like a scaffold for learning. And so it's like offering another modality for people to get the information, and also sometimes increasing the dwell time and making them stay longer at the exhibit. So this next one is community outreach. And so I think we touched on this earlier, but basically the cool thing about this is that mobile devices are everywhere. Everybody has smartphones throughout, like even low income communities and things like that. So this is a really cool, scalable way to do community outreach. And I think the best one is the mobile VR because it's agnostic, whether it's Android or iOS, because it's usually browser based or an app that's using Wi-Fi or something like that. It doesn't matter what type of platform you're on. Whereas the mobile AR, it can be a little more challenging because the workflow for iOS versus Android can be really different. But I think, as I said before, I hope that changes in the future. But I think these are really great technologies for community outreach just by the fact of them being mobile. And then the next one is tech divide. So this is really something that the pandemic has brought into sharp focus, at least in terms of computers, for kids to be able to access computers. And I think This is something I was considering mentioning at the beginning of the presentation, but I didn't want to go way off the rails into nerdland with the XR. But I think one of the things that, but now I'm going to anyway, but one of the reasons why I'm super interested in XR is I've heard it proposed by various sources that I can't cite here, but the engineering department at Cal and other folks that are kind of futurist technology thinkers are talking about XR technology not as like, this is a fun fad for like gamers or something like that, but actually that this could be the beginning of a paradigm shift in HCI or human computer interaction. So if you think about like the way that people engage with computers and like just the structure of a computer, it's kind of like a typewriter. And it's just kind of almost like the way we're engaging with it is almost like a legacy of these previous technologies, but it's not a supernatural way to engage with a computer. And so there's a possibility that in the future, as the technology becomes lighter weight and cheaper and things like that, that AR and VR might replace the way that we currently have laptops and phones and things like that. So I think with that in mind in the back of your head, and also just equity in general, I think it is really important to think about how to provide access. And at the Hall, we have a small history of this being, we were one of the first places to have a public computer lab in the I believe in the mid 60s. And so actually a lot of professors and people that are currently at Cal were like, the first time I used a computer was at Lawrence Hall of Science. And so for us, I think providing that community access to emerging technology is part of our history and is something that we feel strongly about. And I think, you know, there's places like libraries that are doing a really good job with this too. And so the last one about STEM pathways. So this is also really cool. And I think this can be done in different ways. So this could be, you know, a smaller, shorter interaction that's more informal, where it's like families dropping in and learning how to do kind of a maker activity with XR. And I think that that would be really a good fit for mobile AR and mobile VR, because it's like, there's a lot of like fully created apps and things like that where you can scan an object and make your own 3D model and then see it pop up in AR. And so there's ways to kind of easy entry points with those technologies where you can have an empowering maker experience and kind of build your identity as like, this is something that I know about, and just kind of have those baby step experiences. And then there's also the category of going deeper with the full VR and AR headsets. And so that if you had a longer interaction with teens, for example, where they could come to a camp or do an internship or something like that, where you have them for longer, then it becomes a really cool way to build skills around coding. And also with the industrial arts, to learn how to get really comfortable and fluid with creating in these formats could be really beneficial for young people into their future, and also lead to like pretty great jobs actually, where you don't need like to get all the way to a PhD to have a good income. So those can be really neat. So just to summarize some of the affordances here for the exhibit deeper learning, it's a scaffolding exhibits multiple entry points, engaging and dynamic, collaborative, multimodal. For outreach goal, the XR technology that we want to use is mobile because it's scalable. Its personal devices can be used for the VR. It can work for Android and for iOS. And then for bridging that tech divide, it's providing access to emerging technology, but I think it can also apply to mobile VR as well. And then, so the final one, STEM pathways. So that can be done with the mobile XR technology, and then also some of the more bleeding edge type of technologies. And I think what's important there is like empowering hands-on experiences and making, providing career awareness. This is something that I'll touch on in a second, a little bit more in the case study section, but I think it's really important to show diverse role models to kids of people like themselves that have careers in these things already, and then offering maybe youth programs where there can be more skill building. So now, yeah, I want to go into the use cases. So I know I'm actually like running a little bit out of time. So I think there's about 10 more minutes, if my math is right, 12:30 to 1:15, yeah. So the first use case I want to go over is the Kai XR field trips. And so I'm just referring back to my little crazy framework I created here, where I'm going to say these Kai XR, these Kai field trips are hitting outreach, they're hitting tech divide, and they're hitting STEM pathways. And so as I kind of showed some pictures before, these are mobile VR-based field trips, and they're so they're scalable. They're providing access to communities that normally didn't have an experience with XR. So she's going and bringing these to underserved communities, underserved youth in schools, and providing kids with field trip experiences through the VR technology. And also she is personally representing what's possible in an XR career herself, and she's often featured in the videos as host. And a lot of them are also providing career awareness. So I wanted to just toggle over here and show, some clips from her website. And so this is how the kids are interacting with it. So it's kind of like a Google Cardboard headset with a phone inside. And so what we were able to do is we partnered recently with Kai, at least I had a small part to do with it, but it was mostly the Innovative Genomics Institute at UC Berkeley that partnered with her to create a field trip about CRISPR gene editing that featured Jennifer Doudna, the person who discovered CRISPR gene editing. And so I just wanted to play like a really short clip from this. So this is the final video. So you could be watching this video in a headset. So I'll just actually skip ahead a little.
Painful blood disorder, sickle cell anemia.
So this is
Sometimes when
this is about how to gene edit
it feels
to
like
get rid of the condition of sickle cell anemia.
by like a shark. The groundbreaking technology of CRISPR. It is actually a gene editing tool, and for the first time in the US, this technique is now being used to battle genetic diseases like sickle cell.
So I can actually pan, this is like 360, so I can pan around in here. And we're gonna zoom in. So the kids would be watching this in the headset and feel like it's all around
Welcome
them.
to UC Berkeley. Question: if you could change the DNA in any living thing, would you do it? Why or why not? My name is Kai, and today we're at the Innovative Genomics Institute to explore the gene editing scientific breakthrough CRISPR. But first, what is CRISPR? Let's check our notebook for answers, and I'll meet you.
Okay, so I don't want to spend too long on that, but I just wanted to highlight that we were able to create that, and it's really cool. And here's some production stills from the shoot. And so it shows Kai there with Jennifer Doudna. And this is like, you can see this camera here, and it's like a bunch of little VR cameras all together filming in 360. And so that's how that works. And then that footage is imported into like an editing program similar to how you would edit videos, but for 360. And so you can just cut together the different scenes and export it to something like YouTube. And so the next one I just wanted to super quick spotlight is we were able to work with the Innovative Genomics Institute as well to create a full VR experience about CRISPR. And that I didn't have a video clip that I could import here onto this presentation, but basically it's like a full VR experience that you can do in Oculus or in HTC Vive. But we were able to also export it as a planetarium show and as a 360 video that could be watched on like a Google Cardboard, and it can also be done as the full VR experience. And so I think that's a really cool way to kind of make one project and then be able to put it into formats that are more, that are better suited for outreach. And so for that one, I think for the planetarium one, it's an example of having multiple entry points where you can be in the planetarium shown, one person's in the headset, but then everyone else can see what they're seeing projected onto the dome of the planetarium. And so it's, again, those multiple entry points where if someone can't wear the headset, then they can actually be in the planetarium and still have like an immersive experience. But then we were also able to convert that same set of the same experience into a Google Cardboard type mobile VR experience that could be, you know, brought out into the community, or just if someone has a phone, they could download it and watch it on YouTube. Okay, so the next one I wanted to spotlight is a really cool exhibit called Reinventing Reality that we were able to host at Lawrence Hall of Science recently. And I think this one met the goals of the tech divide because it gave people access at our museum to some of this emerging technology in like a high throughput setting, and also STEM pathways because it really highlighted different careers that people could have in XR. And another point too that I think would maybe go for like, I'm not sure where it falls on this framework, but the exhibit was also very inclusive as it was addressing the tech divide and STEM pathways. So the way that it was designed was consciously trying to appeal to girls and also fully bilingual. So people that are underrepresented in STEM are being included and invited into the space, and it's giving you the feeling like you belong here, which is really important. So I'm just gonna breeze through this pretty quickly because I only have a few minutes left, but this is kind of a floor plan from the exhibit. And this exhibit was about the science of XR technology. And so people are learning about how does this technology work. So I think that that's another way that it's kind of bridging the tech divide and also giving information about STEM pathways because it's helping people learn about the technology itself, which is really cool. And so here you're like, how does stereo vision work? Inside, outside tracking, eye tracking. And so people are getting hands-on experiences with the technology to understand how it works. And again, I think the exhibit developers were kind of futurists in this, where they're thinking about how this technology is going to probably become very present in our lives in the future. And people can have this almost as a touchstone experience of, oh yeah, I know how this works. I remember when I was little, I went to this exhibit. And so here's some examples of how it was very inclusive towards girls and supported collaborative engagements. And then another aspect that I wanted to highlight super quick was something I was really excited to be able to actually collaborate on with the developers in creating a series of videos that were shown on this kiosk profiling different people that actually have careers in XR. And so there were 6 different scientists. These guys were in the same video, but there's a series of videos where we profiled really diverse professionals that are doing interesting work from across the whole spectrum of XR. And so we could see them at work, like DEAI Gonzalez works at Microsoft Research, and she's inventing and prototyping a new type of headset that does video pass-through AR. So it's, you know, you don't need to have like a super expensive headset, and it recognizes your hands, and she's sitting there showing us how she's prototyping and coding this thing that's not even out to the public yet, which was really cool. And we saw how it can be used for medical training and at NASA, JPL. So a lot of really cool things with that. Oops. Let's see. Okay, and then the last thing I just wanted to quickly touch on in my last minute was a grant that we have right now that we're in. It's like kind of a work in progress of investigating this idea of making exhibits that promote deeper learning for all. And we're focused more on family conversation with that, but I think that will be an interesting project. I don't have anything to particularly share out, so at this point in time, but it is thinking about like the multiple different roles that people can have in terms of family. But wait, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to still be on this one. But yeah, so different roles that people can have within a family group. So if you're, for example, letting the kid hold the tablet, that's an AR one, and then the parent is looking at some kind of other view, and then they have to jigsaw together because they have different information that will promote them to talk more. Or if you have, you know, grandparents and little kids, and then you have older kids in this like mixed group, then if you have a projected AR that's also interacting with like a headset AR or a handheld one, then you have these different entry points that support different people with different levels of accessibility and things like that. So that's just something that we're working on. But anyway, here's a list of references of the different things that I showed. And I think it's time for Q&A, if my math is right. 45 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Kat. I'm so grateful to learn from you, and I am so grateful to have worked with you this couple months. And we'll continue. We do have a comment in the chat box from Heather about Reinventing Reality, and she posted the link to the Virtual Science Center website and her email address. So thank you, Heather, for that. And I just want to say, if anyone has any questions for Kat, feel free to type them in the Q&A or in the chat box. I'll allow a couple minutes.
Wait for it. I did, while we're waiting, I guess I'll just like go through these pictures because they're so cute from the shoot with Kai. And so that, I think that will be out soon as well in terms of sharing resources. So that could be like a really fun thing to check out for people if you want to see what it looks like to do a field trip, or if you want to get in touch with Kai about doing something at your museum. I think that would be really cool. And this is the Virtual Science Center website for the exhibit Reinventing Reality.
Okay. We do have a question in the chat box. Any tips on helping the development department find funding, any grants that might be a good entry point? That's a great question.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good question. This is a question that is constantly on my mind as well. We did get the IMLS funding, and that was developing this as part of the AR as part of a research project on family conversation and how we can support. So I think that's one way, is to incorporate research that kind of like trying to add to the field around the way people learn with XR. But yeah, I mean, IMLS is a great way to look for grants for the museum space. I noticed that recently I was looking through the Museums for America section of the IMLS, and it seemed like, you know, that is cost shared, but I think if you have a really strong idea of something you want to create with AR or VR, or maybe it's even adding on to something that exists already, that might be a really good one to do. And I noticed they also have a rapid prototyping one through IMLS that is, I think, no cost share, and it's like it's a lesser amount, but it also doesn't involve a research component. So I think those might be two to look into. There's, you know, we've also applied for funding through ASIL, which is, you know, if you're at a science museum, that can be a really good one. But of course, grants are always like so much work and very challenging to get, but I think those could be some good starting points.
Thank you. And I think too, just so I didn't mention this already, when we post the YouTube video, we'll also share a handout that Kat has prepared to take away, and maybe some of these resources, and we can maybe include the funding.
Oh yeah, I'll put that together. I can also put together, any kind of whatever comes up now in the Q&A. I'll make a handout.
Thank you. So we have another question from Sarah. Is there a community or group that is difficult to reach with XR?
I think so. I mean, I think that it's a very heavily visual medium. And so I don't know if that's actually like considered a community of people with low sight, but that was something that I did want to bring up. And I think that there are actually innovations being done for people that can't necessarily access XR. And when I was filming at Microsoft Research for the profile on Diaceline Gonzalez for the Reinventing Reality exhibit, they were also showing us this development toolkit that they had created for low sight VR called Seeing VR. And they had also like a haptic feedback cane. So people that had low sight, some sight, but low sight could still engage with VR, which is really cool that they're thinking about how to make it accessible to everybody. But also I wanted to point out too that XR technology doesn't just mean visual, it can also mean audio is a really big part of that. And I think having spatial audio is a really cool thing where it's like when you get closer, it's 3D and 360. So when you get closer to something, it gets louder like it would in real life. And so it's another way that your reality is being replaced, but not in the visual way, but in the auditory way. And there's also the tactile way as well with the haptic feedback. So I think that's a space of huge innovation that can be explored further. I don't know if that was exactly addressing the question in the right way, but that's what came to mind.
Thank you. Yes, Sarah said it did. Thank you.
Okay, good.
We have a question from Bill. What excites you most about the future of XR?
That's a very good question. I think what excites me the most is also what frightens me, because I kind of can almost see a future where we become cyborgs. I think if this is the Bill I'm thinking of, then it's like we both were at Oculus 6 earlier this past year, and they were showing at the conference how you can incorporate biofeedback into the XR as an input method. And so I think that's definitely the direction that it seems like things are going in, which super excites me, but it's also like a little frightening. And I've heard people say like, at some point, the human computer interaction will be so natural. It's like, it'll just know what you're thinking through like some combination of AI and like picking up on what your biofeedback markers, that it's able to detect like like some stuff with your eye capillaries, or there's sensors. I think maybe Bill was the one telling me this, but with your throat, when you're thinking in your mind and actually saying words in your mind, you're actually making slight movements in your throat. And so if you can have a sensor that can pick up on that, you can actually think words in your head and then they'll get spelled out. Like it's like thought to text. And just so different things like that, where it's like this computing form of technology can become so natural and so integrated into how we are. So you don't have to be sitting at your desk and getting carpal tunnel and bad posture, but at the same time, it's a little bit freaky. But I'm like infinitely excited about it at the same time, but I also don't want to be a cyborg. So I'm torn.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, it is a little creepy, but it's kind of interesting to think about how as technology develops, like we also can learn more about the way that our bodies work. Like I didn't know that about the.
Yeah, I didn't. But it's kind of weird because they're actively working on this, and I think there's going to be a wristband that comes out soon, and there's already all these EEG things that can like read your brain waves and have that along with your pulse and other. So it's coming. It's actually, it sounds really futuristic, but it's actually probably just like a couple years away.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So we have a great question from Heather. Do you think the COVID crisis will inspire more XR projects?
I don't know. I've been thinking about this too, in terms of especially like true isolation, like you're in your home. So that's putting the focus and spotlight less on kind of the shared space XR experiences, but more like how do you, from the isolation of your own place, be in a fully immersive thing that's socially networked. So I think, social VR, where you're basically in like a virtual space, but there's other people's avatars are there. they have that a lot of applications around like virtual meetings and kind of like Second Life kind of idea, but just like more embodied and immersive. I think that that's a space that could really grow, and especially for in the education space too for kids. And again, it's like, is that good or bad? I don't know, but I mean, it's like a way for people to maybe feel more connected, and it might become more important, sadly. Yeah.
That's true. Well, if there are no other questions right now, and we still have a couple more minutes. If people do want to continue sending in questions, you're welcome to. Kat, did you want to review the handout that you were going to share, or?
Yeah, I could. Let me see. It's actually just like a summary of those slides.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt a little insecure about switching what screen I was sharing, but I didn't realize it's not that hard. Like I could preview like one thing extra that I was too scared to switch views during the real webinar. This is just, oh wait. Okay, maybe, wait, did I just share?
I'm seeing emerging tech, virtual reality, VR.
Oh, good, okay, great. So yeah, I wanted to play this clip. Let me turn the volume down on that. But this is available if you have a headset. This is the CRISPR XR experience I was talking about that's available in full VR that can be downloaded, and this is the URL. And so it's actually an experience where you can learn about CRISPR gene editing and learn how to get rid of the trait that leads to the mutation that leads to sickle cell. Okay, so that was one thing. And then let me just share. Can I share my other one that I was afraid to share? Okay. Yeah, so this is the work that we're doing now with the family conversations may or may not coalesce with this project, where we were creating with the engineering department AR that is for healthcare. So we were working with Oakland Children's Hospital trying to design a game that would be cool for kids that are in the immunocompromised ward that are isolated. And so this is it's an AR board game. And so I just wanted to like show a couple slides of that so people could have a pet and like be able to feed it. And then you can actually, whatever space you're in, you can create your own game board and decorate it. And then you can play this kind of Monopoly-ish game where when you roll the dice, you land on different mini games. And so there's this game, Pick Up the Treasures, where when you get onto that square, you have like these different tasks, and they're supposed to be encouraging exercise. So they don't realize it, but these games are making you like squat down and do different things that are healthy. Okay, so I'll just go back to
That's super cool.
So that to be continued, but that's coming out. Hopefully it'll be on the App Store by the end of the fall semester.
Neat. Great. Well, we're at time, so I just want to thank you again, Kat. I also want to thank everyone who's joined us today. Kat Fellowship continues through kind of the spring of next year, so there will be more to come from this fellowship project, and we're so excited to learn from you, Kat, and thank you for all of the knowledge that you've shared and all the great examples that you've pulled together to share with us.
Thank you, Lacey. It's been a pleasure working with you and learning from you as well. And if anybody would like to connect, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, so please hit me up there.
Great. Sorry?
Or email me. I was going to say kate@berkeley.edu. I realized I didn't put my email up.
If you are interested in being in touch with the registrants, I can share out your email, or we can work.
Yeah, please do.
Great. Thank you. In the last just minute, for those of you who are still here, I have something that something else coming up from CAM that I'd like to plug, if you don't mind, Kat.
Yeah, please.
I will take the screen back. That's okay.
Take it away, please. Do I stop sharing?
I think I can. Oops. Okay, can you see my screen now? So for those of us who are still on, and for those of you watching this video, I hope that you will all consider joining us for CAM's Green Museum Seminar. This is the third year that we are hosting this event. However, this year, of course, it will be virtual. So it'll be on September 30th, and the URL is there, and that's where you can learn more about the panelists and the panel presentations and register. And we're really excited to bring together 3 panels all focused on sustainability and climate change and what museums can do to address these issues. And we'll also have a Green Museums trivia and happy hour at the end of the day. So hope you all join us. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. And thank you again.
Thank you so much.